Why is eating red meat important? Are there any substitutions to getting the same nutrients? Okay, so I'm going to answer that from more of a granular 3D perspective, from a nutrient level, okay? And then I'll talk about it more from an energetic level. So red meat is rich in heme iron. There are two types of iron. There's heme iron and non-heme iron, and non-heme iron is the one that's found in plants. The one that's found in red meat is called heme iron, and it's the one that your body absorbs more easily. Ironically, heme iron also improves your absorption of non-heme iron from plant foods. Non-heme iron is very poorly absorbed. Its absorption also can be limited further by anti-nutrients that are present in plant foods, such as phytic acid. So you have to understand that animals can't run away from their predators, so they have chemical defenses, and that's what we call, as a broad category or as a broad term, anti-nutrients, and that includes phytic acid as one particular one. That's really common. This chemical defense system that plants have is what protects them out in the wild. And so, for example, if an animal eats an enormous amount of a particular plant, it can be toxic for them and they throw it up. And so that's one way of limiting the consumption of plants, because plants want to survive. They're living organisms as well. Because of these chemical defenses that plants have, they protect animals from eating, they protect the plants from animals, and that includes humans. And so traditionally, foods were prepared in very specific ways, like grains were prepared and nuts were prepared in very specific ways and being soaked in order to break down these anti-nutrients. And traditional cultural foods were very aware of that. Unfortunately, in modern times, with very heavily processed foods, they don't go through the proper preparation so that those nutrients are absorbed into the body. And so this is one of the issues, is that with just a strictly vegetarian or vegan diet, most people don't go to the effort of preparing their foods properly with the soaking and the sprouting that was done in traditional foods. And so there's a lot less nutrients being available to the body for its functions. You have to understand that reproduction is pretty much last on the body's priority. So if there aren't enough nutrients for its day-to-day, daily life-giving functions, there's not going to be extra for reproduction. And so when you're going into, when you're preparing for pregnancy, you have to have a surplus of nutrients. You have to have more than enough for yourself and for a baby. And so for when people are eating on a vegetarian or vegan diet approach, they have to consume a lot more food than animal eaters, because animal eaters can eat smaller volumes of food, and women generally don't eat a lot of food. And so we can eat smaller amounts and have more nutrients. Ounce for ounce, we just get more nutrients, and it's a lot easier to build that surplus. Whereas with a plant-based diet, the plants are more voluminous, right? They just take up more volume in your stomach, and you get full more quickly. And so you're going to have to really be very conscientious about eating a variety of eating a variety of plant-based foods to compensate for that. And so, yeah, so there are definitely people who have like food sensitivities to animal products, and that's understandable. It also is because of, a lot of times it's because, from my experience in working with clients, it's because their diets have been so limited from childhood. What I've noticed is people eat the same foods all the time, like throughout the year. That's why I emphasize, and this is in my supplements video, to eat a variety of foods and eat based on the season. So you're changing your foods around. what's happening with a lot of kids nowadays, and and including the women who are listening to this, is that it's been so limited in terms of their exposure to different foods that they've developed allergies as adults or in teenage years. So allergic reactions are like, obviously I'm Asian, I'm Chinese. We don't have food allergies. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that as children, if we eat culturally, we eat a very diverse variety of foods. We eat pretty much everything. Whereas now, as the cultures become more westernized, like the Asian cultures become more westernized, they're developing more food allergies because of the highly processed foods that they're eating. And they're also eating less variety. So when your body doesn't have the exposure, it will and then you suddenly introduce it as an adult, it's going to go haywire. Your body just doesn't know how to digest it. And so that's something that can be an issue for people that I've noticed. And for those people, they have to kind of be very gentle in their exposure, like introduction of the foods, so just going really light. You wouldn't start out with red meat. You would start out with like fish, not the fatty fish, just fish in general, and chicken probably, because those tend to be the most mild. Texture also becomes an issue for people because they're not used to chewing food to the degree that we need to chew, animal products. And so I've noticed a lot of vegetarians and vegans just don't like the texture of meat. And that's something that just comes with time, where you basically practice. A lot of it too is you want to learn how to dissociate the story that you have with your food. And this is with anything. This is not just food. You want to learn how to dissociate whatever story that you have with your food with anything, so that you're just very neutral about it. You don't have any assumptions or any like positive or negative assumptions about anything. This is in regard to foods, in your relationship to other people. This is the motherhood journey. A lot of people make stories and assumptions about this blood level meaning this. They create a lot of cause and effect associations in their head, and there's no basis for that. So I'm tangenting, huh? I'm going off tangents. So going back to the food, it's the red meat. Back to the question. The red meat, iron is the big thing, especially because women are bleeding, they're losing blood. So they need to replenish, and the easiest and fastest way is through red meat. You can eat a lot of plants with non-heme iron. Just realize that it just isn't absorbed in the body as well. So you probably need to supplement with iron. The thing is, I feel that if any diet that you're on requires supplementation, there's something wrong with that diet. Your body should be able to live off of and have enough resources just based on what you eat. Supplements only came about in the past few decades, right? We never had supplements for most of human existence. So you should be able to live off of what you eat without supplementation. I only recommend supplements as a way to narrow any nutritional gaps, because our soils are depleted from over farming. I mean, so that's one reason we're getting our foods from places far away. So as they're sitting in the trucks, the nutrient levels go down. The longer that it takes for them to travel to our plate, the nutrient levels will go down. So that's why I recommend supplements. It's just to kind of as a safety net, but it should not be the primary source of your nutrients. So that's why I have an issue with any diet that requires supplementation. The other nutrient is vitamin B12. That's pretty much exclusively found in animal source foods such as fish, meat, dairy products, and eggs. They're found in certain types of seaweed, but in trace amounts, so it's not really enough on its own. So the supplements, the vitamin B12 supplements that are vegan would be seaweed based. It's a nutrient that's involved in developing red blood cells. and maintains nerves and normal brain function. So a lot of some of the nutrients that are really essential for brain function, like DHA, they're found primarily in animal sources, in the fats of the animals, and so it's just easier to get. Eating poultry and seafood. So you can, so if you can eat poultry and seafood, then eat more fatty fishes like the salmon, the mackerel, herring, and anchovies. And I go over that in the nutrition video that's on YouTube right now, so you can check that out. Let's see, what else is there? Any other questions? Okay. So, the other reason for the red meat is in Chinese medicine and in a lot of cultures, we look at food as having a certain amount of energy, right? Everything goes back to energy. And so there's more vitality. There's just more inherent energy in animal products. So for example, it's like if you eat, so culturally in the Chinese culture, I'm going to say Chinese culture because that's what I'm familiar with. I don't know about the other cultures so much. In the Chinese culture, and I'm also trained in Chinese medicine where we use a lot of animal products therapeutically. When you want more vitality, the nutritional recommendation is to eat more animals and to use supplements, use herbs that are more animal based. And the reason is because there's more inherent energy in meat products. Like there's more energy in a lion versus a tree, right? And so we take that into account when we're prescribing herbs and prescribing nutritional recommendations based on a person's health condition. We take that into account. It's not just the nutrients, which is it's very reductionistic just to look at the nutrients, which is what kind of modern medicine does. It's just they look at the nutrients, but we look at the energy of it, the temperature of it. Foods have certain temperatures. Meat is very warming. If you notice that a lot of women tend to have cold hands and feet, a lot of times their body tends to be very cold. So in that circumstance, we would recommend more meat, red meat, because they are very warming. Like lamb would be great and beef would be great. And there are definitely spices that are warming, like cinnamon is really warming, turmeric, garlic, ginger, they're all very warming. But you just get a lot more bang for your buck out of just animals. We also use, in Chinese medicine, we also, like, depending on the issue, for example, like we recommend women eating their placenta after birth to replenish. So that's a really prime, very common example throughout all cultures, really, all indigenous cultures, to dry it out and then eat it afterwards. We cook tendons and ligaments whenever someone has tendon and ligament issues. So we use that part of the body that is similar to what we're trying to heal because the energy is very similar. So we think of it as more than just nutrients. I hope that makes sense in terms of why we are so traditionally, why we just recommend animal products so much more. The other thing is when you look at a slab of red meat, like rare, not cooked, it looks like our muscle meat, right? It looks like our muscles. Because of that, the nutrients are much more bioavailable than, say, plants or any others. So we try to go for the similarity. For example, and we use that same concept with other foods like walnuts. We know walnuts are great for the brain. What does a walnut look like when you crack open the shell? It looks like the brain. What's another example? Tomatoes. Tomatoes are great for the heart. When you cut open a tomato, you see the chambers of a heart, like the chambers, the chambers of a tomato, like the chambers of a heart. It's very similar. And so we use a lot of foods based on that similarity. Pomegranates, right? When you open up a pomegranate, lots of little seeds in there. It's great for the ovaries. I always recommend, when pomegranates are in season, which I think it still is now, eat pomegranates intentionally. Like you sit down and you peel and you break open a pomegranate, and the other great thing about pomegranate, it's bloody red, and that's perfect. You know, it's that blood, the significance of the blood, right? So you sit down intentionally eating a pomegranate at your table, and just, you know, really just kind of appreciate the ovaries and the eggs that it's maturing as you're eating that pomegranate. It's a really great way to tune into your body. What else? Avocado. The shape of an avocado is a uterus, right? The labia, the vagina, and the reproductive organs. What is that? It's a seashell. Oyster for the reproductive organs, right? The female reproductive organs. So we use that a lot in Chinese medicine. We look at the similarities.